Hello. What you're about to read will shock you. I need to confess the strange and terrible crime I have committed, and I can't bear to keep my secret any longer. I beg you not to stop listening. For years I have hidden myself away from the world. You see, I'm hideously ugly, too ugly to describe. You would be shocked and horrified at the sight of my face. I was a miserable and wretched creature because I never knew love. I never felt the affectionate touch of a hand or the warm feeling of a pair of lips brushing against mine. I was a carpenter by trade, and I worked all day in a factory making furniture. My specialty is making chairs. My skilled hands carved the wood, screwed the pieces together, fashioned the backrests and armrests, and did the upholstery, padding the cushions and sewing the covers. As I worked, I felt like an artist creating a great masterpiece. When my chairs were finished, I would always test them out to make sure they were comfortable. It gave me great thrill to imagine all the different people who would sit on the chair I created. Unlike me, they had wonderful, happy lives. They had someone they loved and who would love them back. Every time I thought of them, I felt nothing but misery and despair. One day, when I was designing a new type of chair, and as I worked, a very strange idea began to take over in my mind. I changed the design and made a hollowed space inside. It was a cavity large enough to fit a human body. Of course, I had to take out a lot of the wooden framework and the springs inside. The knees would just be below the seat, and the head and the upper body would be inside the backrest. Someone could sit inside the chair and no one would ever know they were there. I left a small space for supplies like food and drinks, and I even included a little potty for, those times where you have to go to the bathroom. By the time I was finished, the chair had become a miniature home. I stripped off my clothes and I climbed inside the chair. Can you imagine how strange that felt? It was a tight fit, but I managed to get used to it after a while. I was in complete darkness, but I can hear what was going on around me. I heard my colleagues walking around the factory looking for me. They had no idea that I was right under their noses. After a while, some delivery men loaded me up on a truck and transported me to a furniture store. They put me on display in the middle of the shop floor and left me there. I was perfectly concealed and nobody was any the wiser. I was like a crab or a turtle, but instead of a shell, I had my chair. As soon as I arrived, customers started testing out the chair. I can't tell you how many unknown bottoms sat down on me. Some of them had big fat bottoms like jellyfish, and the others had thin bony ones like a skeleton. Some were firm, and others had chubby ones, bouncing up and down on me like a rubber ball. It was an amazing feeling. I could feel the warmth of their flesh through the material. Their shoulders rested against my chest and their arms and hands rested on mine. Not one of them suspected that the soft cushion they were sitting on was actually little old me. Previously, because of my grotesque and disturbing appearance, people had always recoiled at the sight of me. But now my skin was virtually touching theirs through a thin layer of cloth. Hidden inside the chair, I imagined myself hugging them and wrapping my arms around them in a passionate embrace. Of course, it was a strange sort of existence. After spending so long inside the chair, sitting in the same position, my muscles started to wither away. I could barely move and my body was crooked and bent. I was folded up like a contortionist, but I didn't care. All I can think about was the exquisite feeling of having people sit on me. One day, somebody bought my chair. The delivery man picked me up, put me in the back of a van, and brought me to the home of a nice family. They put me in their living room facing the TV. Within days, every member of the family had sat on me at least once. I was in heaven. But there was one member of the family I loved more than all the others. This person was very special to me, and as time went on, I began to fall in love with them. I couldn't help myself. Whenever they sat down on me, I tried to make my knees as comfortable as possible for them. Whenever they leaned back on me, I would embrace them more warmly and make them nice and snug. When they felt tired, I would move my knees back and forth, gently rocking them to sleep. You may think I was mad, but I was madly in love with this person. I became obsessed with them, and I longed for them to return my feelings. I reached the point where I felt that if they knew I was there, they would fall in love with me too. The person loved to read, so I came up with a cunning plan. I wrote my own story and submitted it to a website they frequent. By now, you've probably guessed who I'm talking about. That's right, it's you. I've been in your home for so long, you've probably forgotten where I came from. Every night I crawl out of the chair and sneak upstairs to watch you sleep. I can't bear to be away from you for a moment. I love you, and I think you could love me too, if only you saw me. Now, after you finish listening to this, please turn around and look at me. I'll be waiting. Don't be afraid. Come and sit down on my knees. I miss your touch. I awoke to the sounds of my mother in the kitchen. Groggily, I swung my legs out from under the covers and got dressed in jean shorts and a simple white t-shirt. Then I grabbed a white cloth off my dresser. It was a bandana that I had found earlier in the year, in January. It was in a box at a yard sale labeled, "Do not wear in sunlight." A funny joke, I thought. I took it to the lady running the sale. She was old and frail. She stared at me. "Don't wear that in the sun." I laughed and bought it anyway. I put it on my head and tied it in the back. I'd never worn it before. As I walked into the kitchen, my mother said to me, "Darling, can you go out to the shed and get the hedge clippers? I need you to trim the holly bushes out front." I agreed to do what she asked. After all, she was my mom. So I strolled down to the cobblestone path behind our house towards the shed. As I neared that old shed, I noticed how hot it was outside. It was so hot outside that the heat was coming off of the surface of the shed in waves. I pushed open the door. "Ow!" I exclaimed. The sizzling door blistered my hand. I shook it off and went inside. Oh, it was sweltering. I immediately broke into a sweat. The drops rolled off my nose and onto the dirt floor of the shed. I wanted to quickly find the hedge clippers. As I dug around in a toolbox, the sweat on my face started to blur my vision. I wiped my brow and was surprised to find that the sweat didn't come off. I passed it off as a trick of the heat, blinked my eyes, and found the hedge clippers. I left the shed only to find even more heat outside. Oh, it was painful, but I had to do what my mom asked or I'd be in trouble. I clumbed to the front yard and started on the bushes. The sun bared down on my back and arms. Even my butt felt like fire, and I was crouching, hiding it from the sun. My front and face and feet and fingers were all burning too. The heat was unmeasurable, intense, and I suffered all afternoon. Every time I tried to wipe the sweat away, it stayed and got sopped up in my bandana, which created a soaking wet veil on my head. And finally the bushes were finished. I quickly retreated inside and into my room to get clothes. Then I flew into my bathroom to take a shower and clean up. I gasped at my reflection. Bright red skin stretched over my face and back and front. No tan lines were visible. My whole body was sunburned and the sweat remained unclearable from my vision. I touched my skin. Agony erupted all over my body. I then realized I hadn't removed the bandana. I tried to pull it off. It wouldn't come. I tried in vain to rip it from my head, but it wouldn't budge. On the third attempt, I accidentally touched my burned skin. In a fit of pain, I scratched my forehead. My skin was already peeling. I took hold of the peeled piece and pulled, eyes closed, for I could sense the coming agony, but it didn't come. I continued to pull at the piece. Finally, it came loose. I opened my eyes and screamed. My face had been peeled off, and the bandana had come with it. I looked at the bandana in horror. The memory of the box it was in was coming back to me. Slowly, the rest of my skin on my head fell off, peeling in slow motion. I watched in horror as the skin of my arms and legs went. Just as my eyes burned, bloodshot, were about to fall out, I noticed a brownish smeared words on that bandana, written in blood and sweat. I warned you not to wear it in the sun. He sat on the porch swing on one of those bright blue and white winter mornings, sipping his first cup of coffee of the day, when he noticed the lump. It was pea-sized and just inside his right wrist, raised a little bit above the skin and slightly red. He poked at it, felt the fluid inside shift a bit, and the skin became shiny with tension. He thought he could feel something hard inside, a little note of flat firmness underneath the flesh. Bone, he thought, unalarmed, or cartilage. He sipped his coffee and looked out over the crystalline white yard, breath steaming, evergreens peeking through where snow had fallen off the branches. He absently scratched at the lump. He dug deeper with his fingernail. He could feel the outline of the object inside the lump. It seemed to recoil deeper into his arm at his probing. It had a sharp but smooth ridge, and was about a quarter-inch long. Alarm woke in him, distant at first, then closing in as he continued to feel around the lump and explore it. The lump was familiar and alien at the same time. Him, but not him. He pressed harder and felt a slight pop as the fluid released and trickled down his forearm. As he did, he noted a new lump arise just inside his left wrist, a smaller one beside it. The recessed object now rose from the original lump like an undersea volcano, white and streaked with red, sharp and hard. A tooth. A canine tooth, in my arm. As the oddness of this registered, new lumps arose on his thighs, shoulder, and feet. He tried to shake the first tooth out of his arm, panic taking hold and whispering in his ear like a lover, but all he succeeded in doing was to splatter blood out all over the crystalline white yard, each droplet sinking in as it lost its warmth to the snow. Lumps erupted and swirled on his scalp and on his genitals. Teeth, legion in number, erupted from these newly formed lumps, sprouting up and moving centrally to line up, his navel at the center. His navel tore open, the lines radiating out to form a mouth in the middle of his abdomen. The pain was like fire. The sensation of tearing muscle, skin, was so unbearable he nearly swooned. He felt himself bent into an angle, his head forced into the mouth at his midsection by the drawn of this new opening. He felt the bone of his spine crack, realign and break as he doubled over. And up to his shoulders, further he curled in. A thick slurping sound emanated from the mouth at his center. Tighter and tighter he went till his feet disappeared into the mouth. Like a reverse Cheshire cat, the mouth folded in on itself, emitting a final breath of the graveyard air into the chilly morning. Then it too was gone.